The long-awaited prequel to Game of Thrones, known as House of the Dragon, is in its mid-season.
Yep.
And it's excellent. I like it. So John and I are here to review it. Very likely there will be spoilers in this conversation. So if you haven't watched it yet, you have been warned. You are not allowed to yell at us after the fact. With that said though, let me set it up. I'm gonna do my best to set it up. So the show is firmly focused, as the New York Times reports, on palace intrigue. It's kind of like the Game of Thrones version of Succession. I like to think of it that way, okay? Because it's all about the Targaryens. The Targaryens are in power. This is a prequel, so this is before everything that transpires in Game of Thrones, okay? And so Targaryens are in power, and the question is, who will take the king's place once the king dies? Because the king doesn't have any sons. Bit of a problem. He's got a brother. Brother's a little crazy.
Yeah.
He's got a daughter. Daughter's young. They're living in a misogynistic time.
Yeah.
Can she be the leader? Can she be the one who takes over once her father dies? That's the big question, right? And so the New York Times says it's a bit like HBO's current big hit Succession. With dragons instead of helicopters, the white-haired Targaryens hold the Iron Throne, but their messy family structure complicates their efforts to keep it. The king's oldest child is a girl, Renayra, who's played by Millie Alcock and replaced mid-season by another actress, Emma D'Arcy. And while we can see that she's well qualified to succeed him, her gender means that she will have to fight off challenges from every side. Her debauched uncle, Damien, or is it Damon?
I think it's Damon.
Damon, yeah, who's of course played by Matt Smith. The children of her friend turned rival, Allison, one of my favorite characters. She's played by Emily Carey, later Olivia Cook, and enemies outside her family. Okay, so I set up the premise. With the premise set, John, take it away.
Oh, okay. So first of all, understand for context, we did a review show that would do usually immediate reactions and sometimes live viewings of Game of Thrones. And I participated in, I believe, every single episode of Game of Thrones. And I read it years and years before that. That said, and I was a fan of the 8th season, which most people did not, because it became popular to hate it, and there's no good reason to despise it. But anyway,
you're the kind of person who, this is a review on you, real quick. You're the kind of person who loves, if you're gonna love something, you will love unconditionally. You're that kind of person. He's got a big heart.
Unfair.
It's true.
The specific attack. Anyway, don't at me, at Emma Vigeland. But anyway, because she's dead wrong, and everybody's take on Daenerys is dead wrong, dead wrong. But anyway, but that said, once it was done, when we heard that there were all these prequels, I actually was not excited for any of them because I felt like it's just going to be a cheap copy of it. And that said, so I was gonna watch it obviously, but I wasn't super excited for it to come out, and it's been pretty good. Yes. I do think there are things that are lacking in it.
Tell me.
So specifically, and there are lots of good things. Overall, I really like it. I look forward to every episode coming out. My wife and I watch it the night it comes out. One of the things that the show does lack, if you are someone who enjoyed Game of Thrones, is there isn't really an equivalent to like a Tyrion or an Arya. The Game of Thrones had lots of drama and action, but also levity. It had people who approached the world with sarcasm and comedy. And this show occasionally gives random people, or maybe Damon, a little bit of that, but there's no character like a Tyrion, and I am lacking that. Pretty much everyone is stoic and serious and invested in power. It's like a show of Varys's and Littlefingers and Cersei's, basically, is what the show is, which is fine, but I do hope that they add a little bit of levity to it.
That's actually a great critique. I didn't notice that, but now that you say it, that's certainly true. There's a lot, I mean, you mentioned Damon potentially filling that role, but no, I think Damon is, that's him, okay, Damon Targaryen. He is the king's brother. And the thing about him is he's impulsive, he's out of control, he's thirsty and hungry for power, and is furious at the fact that his brother decided to name his daughter as the individual who will take over once he dies. But will she? And that's where the palace intrigue comes in, because prior to Renayra, the king's daughter, there was another woman who had the opportunity to take over. So that's Renayra. She's going to be replaced by another actress in, I think, later
the next episode.
The next episode,
which we'll talk about.
And so anyway, so there's the queen who never was. That's how they referred to her, because there was an opportunity for her to take over, and the men of the Vale, I believe it was, or
I think it was pretty much the assembled nobles of the Seven Kingdoms.
Yeah, they're like, no, that's not gonna happen.
Yeah, it was a prelude of effectively what's gonna happen throughout this show.
Exactly, so they fought back against it. She was never able to be queen, and she's bitter about that, super bitter about that. So there's this wonderful scene, I believe in the 3rd episode, where Renayra and the queen who never was have this exchange, and Renayra is warned about what's to come. Like, I know that your father just named you the person who will succeed him, but the fact of the matter is that ain't happening. Don't you remember what happened to me? And I think there's like a little tinge of jealousy there as well.
Definitely.
Because Renayra seems to be more of a fighter. She's defiant, and she certainly doesn't like to believe in authority, follow authority, or go along with traditions. She also made the right decision in sleeping with the knight who's supposed to be protecting her. So let's go to him. This is the most important.
You mean politically she made the right choice, right?
That is a beautiful man. That's Sir Criston Cole. Okay, she actually chose him to be the knight that protects the family.
She did.
And that was a great scene, I enjoyed it.
I bet.
And the reason, look, she chose him not because he's a good-looking guy. I'm sure that probably factored into her decision.
I think it was like 50%.
Yes, but she also chose him because he was the only one vying for that role who had combat experience.
Yeah.
So smart.
If she was really prioritizing that, she could have had them spar or something.
I think it's questionable that all of the king's advisors were trying to get her to choose an individual who didn't have combat experience.
Well, I don't think they were choosing people who didn't have combat experience. I think they were choosing people based purely on politics and alliances, and those people had been like safely ensconced away from conflict because they were the sons of nobles or the cousins of nobles or whatever.
They sound super soft.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
So whereas at least in one scene, he very much was not.
Right.
But anyway,
right.
Yeah. Yeah, no, he's a good guy. He's got combat experience, really good at controlling his temper. We found out, no, he's a great guy all around.
He's not.
But anyway, I don't know why I didn't immediately think when I saw him, oh my God, Anna's gonna freak out over this guy.
Super hot. He's like 100% my type. Anyway, that doesn't matter. That's not really part of the review. So let's also discuss the scheming that's taking place among the king's advisors, because early on in the season, the king is desperate for an heir, right? Desperate for a male heir who can take the throne after he passes. So there's the king. And so in the beginning of the season, his wife is pregnant. And so she has a difficult birthing process, okay? And the king is told that they need to make a decision. The baby is breached, and at the time, it's not like they had C-sections. So they're like, you need to choose either your wife's life or the baby's life. And he desperately wants a son.
Yeah.
And so he chooses the baby.
Well, technically that's just following Texas law, but yes.
That's actually so true, it's so disgusting. And so that was a really difficult scene to see. He loves his wife, and it was a difficult decision for him to make. But what really stands out throughout this season, in my opinion, is this loyalty to the throne, this loyalty to your duty, right? So to the point where you will literally go against and lose the ones you love the most just to ensure that you're fulfilling your duties to the throne.
Yeah, and also it sort of sets up an original sin. You kind of have original sin. You have sort of one, you could argue one or two in Game of Thrones that set up a lot of the conflict. That one, if he had chosen differently, then in theory, he still would have had his wife, who supposedly he did really love. They could have tried again for a child. He would not have been put in a position where he was offered marrying the Valerian daughter and then wouldn't have made them mad, which then means he wouldn't have had to give Renayra to them. He wouldn't have ended up being seduced by Alicent or whatever.
Yeah,
it would have avoided so many of these problems.
You can't gloss over this stuff. We have to explain it.
Okay.
So his wife's dead. Okay.
Well, I'm assuming they've seen it. If they haven't seen
That's
it,
a great
it's weird.
point. That's such a great
I'm assuming
point.
they've seen it, but
okay. So the Alicent thing, though,
she's good. I like her.
I like her a lot too. Although I think her acting needed a little bit of work early on in the season. So that's Alicent. Her father, who is or was at this point one of the king's advisors, got her to
Otto Hightower, I believe.
Otto Hightower, exactly. He got his daughter to essentially seduce the king after his wife died. Okay, she did just that, and in the end, like he decides to marry her, and she bears his children, like has a few of his children. And I thought, oh, she's not into him at all. She's being pressured by her father to do this. She's disgusted by it, but she's doing it because she has no other choice. But then in the explainer part of the show, like after the show, there's an explainer. She says like, no, they fell in love. I'm like, did they? Did they really fall in love? I don't really know.
Yeah, it's possible there were scenes that were taken out. I do think that you can have subtext to a show, but you also have to go by what's actually shown on screen.
Yeah.
I think that you can read that, like when she's bathing him and stuff, I read a little bit of love in that. And look, she can simultaneously feel affection for one of literally the only people she knows. Someone who has cared for her, did produce a kid, and also be absolutely disgusted by the idea of having this like guy who's literally like rotting on top of her like Steve Bannon. She can be disgusted by that and still love him in some way. She doesn't have any friends, she doesn't have any companionship.
But that was by design. I mean, she ends up being queen because she's married to the king at this point. And that means that she has to kind of give up her pre-queen life, including her friendship with the king's daughter, Renayra.
Well, it's to provide a contrast. Renayra and her are women who are existing in this context and having to figure out what is my path going to be. And they're sort of like, they're reflections, they're 200-year earlier reflections of how people like Sansa Stark and Daenerys Targaryen are gonna navigate a society that has evolved in subtle ways, a little bit. But they have even less autonomy than like effectively the people who they're most similar to will later on. And so, but what's cool about that is Alicent isn't a dragon rider. Like she has to use the tools she has. She's young, she's of high blood, and she's attractive, and so she's gonna use that. She doesn't like it, she's uncomfortable, she feels isolated. And so, because she's not a cartoonish caricature of a villain, when she starts to make the sort of decisions that they're hinting at in coming episodes, you could sort of understand why she would be really terrified of losing the position she's in, losing the children that she has. Renayra too, she doesn't want to end up off on some castle, just married to some lord or whatever, kind of like Arya in that case.
Yeah, and so the fact that Alicent ends up marrying the king leads to a problem with her relationship with Renayra. And finally, Renayra seems to get over it and they become friends again. But then Renayra betrays Alicent by lying to her, which Alicent needs to, like, Alicent, let's move it along.
Who cares?
Okay. So there was a rumor that, by the way, I want to ask you about this. There was a rumor that Renayra and Damon had sex in an unsavory place in public. She says, no, swear to God, we didn't have sex. And that's the thing about House of the Dragon. Something that really stands out is it's not as, the sex scenes aren't as graphic as the sex scenes from Game of Thrones. And I think it's because times have changed and the Me Too movement has happened, a lot of actresses have spoken out. So I think they're a little more careful with those kinds of scenes. So you don't, it's not as graphic as what you would expect from like Game of Thrones.
Also, the actresses are playing very, very young, and so they probably want to be extra careful with that.
Yeah. So Renayra swears that while they were making out and they were physical, that
they didn't actually have sex.
They didn't have sex. I don't know if that's true. I can't tell.
Well, I don't think we're supposed to know. I think that they added a little bit of ambiguity. My guess would be no. I think that there was some stuff going on, but no, I don't think that they had sex.
But that led to this sexual liberation for Renayra to the point where she finally did what I guess she's been meaning to do, what she's wanted to do, which is sleep with
Kristen Cole. Yeah, which is a super bad call for many reasons.
Well, it happened. And that was the only thing in the show that really made sense to me.
Yeah, now of course we should point out, we're talking about like Me Too or whatever. There is a massive power dynamic disparity in that. When she's seducing Kristen Cole, now I have no doubt that Kristen Cole is interested in her. But by the same token, if he doesn't do it, she could have him killed anytime she wants. So that's unfortunate. He could lose his position, be cast aside, all of his honor is gone. But then at the same time, if he does it and if it doesn't go well, which it doesn't, then he could be killed or cast out of the King's Guard. So he's in a rough position there.
He is, he's in a very rough position.
Yeah, well, it was she put him in several rough positions and then now he's in a rough political position.
But look, as a woman, seeing the evolution of Renayra so early on in the season was great, right? Where she's learning about herself, she's learning about her own power. And more importantly, she's learning about the importance of going for it. You know what I'm saying? Like,
well, yeah, she has a little bit less. She is sort of a halfway point between Viserys and Damon in a lot of ways.
Yes, that's a good point. That is a good point. And look, honestly, what you see in her is just this struggle to figure out who she is, right? And she feels trapped in this family, in this dynasty, as they would say in Downton Abbey. And she complains about it a lot, but it also seems like she enjoys like being able to rise to the occasion. And it seems like she's willing to fight to, really withhold the power that is granted to her through, her father.
Yeah, and she shares something in common with a lot of the young nobles from Game of Thrones in that she complains about her position in no small part because she has no idea what it would be like to live the life of a peasant in that world.
Yeah. Well, we're running out of time, but I do wanna just quickly talk about the teaser that they showed after the last episode that aired. And so we have that video for you. Let's take a quick look at that and then we've got thoughts.
Address the latest developments in the Stepstones, my lords.
Where, I wonder, is our Prince Damon?
It was a decade ago and he has since left the region undefended.
We have left it undefended. My queen?
What are children but a weakness? Through them you imagine you will persist forever.
You will be our king. We are the blood of old Valyria.
But for them, you surrender what you should not. A father compromised by the acts of a son.
To have one child like that is a mistake. To have three is an insult.
People have eyes.
The consequences of an allegation like the one you twirled would be dire.
Dracarys!
Okay, so some people gonna be burned. Yeah, look, it's setting up some of the things we like from Game of Thrones. We want to be unsure who is going to use their power, how there's gonna be violence meted out, is there gonna be war? That's all good. There are things that we aren't getting a ton of, unfortunately, like the world trotting and the exploration and stuff. Like I said, the humor, but they're focusing on the conflict, the political intrigue, and I think they're doing a good job. A little bit of mystery too.
I think there's a good amount of mystery, and you see relationships devolve, evolve. Like Alicent seems to have had a realization that, because she's now had children with the king, including a boy, and so the question is, will my son get to be king? So like that's gonna cause strain in her relationship. There's already strain in her relationship with Renayra, so I'm curious to see how that plays out. It's good. I like it, and
yeah, it's good.
And yeah, I think it's. I hear you. I think that your criticisms are definitely valid, but I have to say I didn't notice it until you said it. Like the lack of a Tyrion type character. I definitely want to see something like that. And who knows? I mean, it's early on in the first season.
Yeah. I hope that eventually, and I think that we will start to zoom out a little bit and visit a few other areas. Like Game of Thrones, like we're used to seeing north of the Wall, and then in King's Landing, and then over in the Dothraki Sea and all that. I do miss that a little bit. I am also. There's nothing they could do about this, and they delayed it as long as they could. We've had multiple jumps of 6 months, 2 years, all that, just getting to this point, halfway through the first season. The fact that they're replacing the actresses, I get it.
Yeah.
But I don't love it. In the end, maybe they'll be great. But while I was initially hesitant around both Alicent and Millie Alcock because they seemed so young. I've since found out that Millie Alcock's like 22 years old. I thought she was
wow.
I thought she was 14, legitimately.
Wow.
But anyway, now you're done. You're gone. You're off the show, and here's new people. There's nothing they can do. This is a story that takes place over a long period of time, but I don't know, it makes me uncomfortable. I'm sure we'll get used to it, and in 2 seasons, it won't matter anymore. But we never had to experience that in Game of Thrones.
Yeah, that's
true. You had
true.
actors who were replaced, but that was only because they went off and did other things. Like, it was the same character, I don't know.
No, I totally hear what you're saying. You grow attached to characters and specific actors and actresses who play those roles.
Renayra's good, I like her. I think she's a good actress.
Excellent, I think the acting is great. I had a few issues with Allison early on, but she grew on me for sure. So look, I'm not a professional content reviewer, but I'm doing my best. I hope this was helpful. Want to hear what you guys think.
Yeah.
So comment in the section below. Let us know.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.